Hello, welcome back to Teens Talk Politics. I'm Andrew, and I'm here alone. Sam will be back next week. I was not able to get someone on, and also on Tuesday we had Ben on, and he didn't really know much about the topic, so I felt like it didn't flow as well. So this week, today it's just going to be me, and we're going to be talking about this week's political news. And the first thing we're going to talk about is a major subject right now in the political world, and this is about Texas Democrats are now fleeing to Washington to get national Democrats in the Senate to vote for H.R. 1 to pass that voting rights legislation so that the bill in Texas does not get passed. That will, it suppresses a lot of the vote for people that have a lower financial wealth and also minorities in general. So I'm going to pull up the bill itself, and a few notable things is it has a ban on drive-through voting. And this is a major thing because if you don't have a bunch of time to go wait in a line, you work 8, 9, 10 hours a day, you won't have time to wait in a very long line to fill out your ballot and then put it in the system. Doing the drive-through voting is much faster. And let me read a little segment off this article. Harris County first tested drive-through voting in the summer 2020 primary runoff election with little controversy, but the use of the 10 drive-through polling places from the November general election came under Republican scrutiny. The county's drive-through polling places were mostly set up under large tents. Voters remained in their cars and showed a photo ID and verified the registration before casting ballots on portable voting machines. At the Toyota Center, home of the Houston Rockets, drive-through voting was located in a garage. The opinion proved popular with 1 in 10 in-person early voters in the county casting their ballots at a drive-through location. So this is a major thing because this also just expands where people can vote. Especially in places like Harris County, like they were talking about, this is where it was mainly. This is a very large county with a significantly large percentage of the population in Texas. And it has a lot of Hispanics and blacks there. So they need more and more polling places because the larger the population is, the more access you're going to need for people to vote. The lower the population is, you might not need as many polling places because there's going to be less people to use them. So I think getting rid of drive-in voting isn't going to be a very good thing for Texas lawmakers to do, for Republicans, because it really benefits themselves, not helping the people that they're there to serve. And another thing that this will do is because Harris County is such a Democratic county, a majority, like I said, is a minority population, so they primarily vote for Democrats. Them getting rid of drive-through voting is suppressing their vote. The less polling places you have, the less opportunity they're going to have to vote. And this really shows you what Republicans are trying to do. I was watching this Fox News segment the other day on Laura Ingram's segment. It was like 10 to 11, I think, Eastern Standard Time. And they were talking about how Texas is actually trying to expand voting rights. And that is just not true. You're trying to suppress the vote of minorities in Harris County that primarily vote Democratic. It is obvious. And for them to try to shield it like it's not actually happening is very unjust, and they're basically lying to themselves and their audience on Fox News. And here's another big one. New regulations for early voting hours, including a ban on 24-hour voting. The reason this is so big is, I was talking before, if you're working 8, 9, 10, or more hours a day, you will not be able to vote 24 hours. Like, if your shift ends at 1 in the morning, you work fast food or something, you won't be able to vote. So I'm going to read another segment from this article. Both bills are regulated early voting hours to expand early voting offered in Harris County, which has pioneered 24 hours of uninterrupted voting at a few polling places for one day. The House wants to establish a new voting window of 6 a.m. to 10 p.m., while the Senate would cut off voting at 9 p.m. The bills add an extra hour of required early voting hours for local elections, moving it from 8 hours to 9. Both bills lower the population threshold for counties required to provide at least 12 hours of early voting each weekday in the second week of early voting in state elections. The Senate would lower the current population threshold from counties with a population of 100,000 or more to those with a population of 30,000 or more. The House sets a 55,000 or more threshold. As expected, the House and Senate both retreated for controversial proposals to restrict the start time for Sunday early voting times, which was deteriorated as an attack on Souls to the Polls effort focused on black churchgoers. Instead of both chambers applying these new windows of voting in week hours and adding an extra hour of required voting hours, moving it from 5 hours to 6. So basically what they're saying is, so the main hours that you're allowed to vote will be normally from 6 to 10. 6 to 9. And they're trying to move it from 6 to 10. And this would give you an extra hour to vote. And this is their excuse of, we're actually trying to expand early voting because we're adding an extra hour. But the thing is, they're banning 24-hour voting. So there's the system where you can vote 24 hours, not at a poll, fill out your ballot, and then you can just drop it off. You can no longer do that because they have banned it. And I think this is another way they're trying to suppress the vote. If you get off work after 10 p.m., you cannot vote. There's really no way. And if you're getting off work after 10 p.m., you're probably not going to be up before your next shift, or you won't have time between the 6 a.m. when the polls open again and whenever your shift starts again. So this is another way they're trying to regulate how minorities are voting and how often they're voting and whether or not they're going to vote at all. And another thing they mentioned is cutting off voting hours on Sundays, especially when black churchgoers vote early in Souls to the Polls. And this is, just as it says, soul to the polls, this is soulless of Republicans in the House and Senate in Texas to do. Because this is cutting off the time that minorities can vote. And they primarily vote Democratic. So they know this is going to help them and have them advantage. Because Texas is slowly but surely shifting more and more to the left. Like, if you look at presidential results, in the election 2000, Texas wasn't even close against Bush and Gore. Bush and Kerry, election wasn't even close. McCain and Obama wasn't close. Romney and Obama wasn't close. But then we get to Hillary Clinton versus Donald Trump. And it got closer than it has ever since Bill Clinton. And then again, it narrowed again between Trump and Biden. And it got even closer in the 2018 Senate election against Ted Cruz and Beto O'Rourke. So Republicans know that Texas is slowly but surely getting narrower in the political climate. The House majority in Texas, they used to have a 2/3 majority in the Senate and the House back in 2016. 2018 came around, they still have a majority, but they lost a significant amount of seats to the Democrats. So they know, like I said, that the state is narrowing up. And they really want to do something like this. The same thing happened in Georgia not too long ago. They passed a ridiculous voting suppression bill, not even letting people deliver water to those who had been waiting hours in line to vote. Because they're trying to suppress the vote of people that do not have a good place to vote, that are in high-density areas with few polling places. If you live in a high-density area, you're primarily going to have Democrats there. In cities, urban areas, you're going to have Democrats. The more rural areas are primarily Republicans in most cases. Of course, in places like Vermont and Massachusetts, rural voters don't necessarily are Republicans, but for a vast majority of the country, they are going to be Republicans. And they're trying to suppress the urban vote. And especially in Georgia, after Raphael Warnock and John Ossoff won, giving Democrats control in the United States Senate. It was primarily urban areas like Atlanta, like Savannah, that gave us that win. By us, I mean Democrats, that win. And going back to Texas, we're going to go on to the next thing in this bill. It's a ban on distribution of mail-in ballots applications. And this is really putting the nail in the coffin to a lot of people that don't have much time to vote. If you're not going to go out of your way to get a mail-in ballot, because it's not going to be automatically distributed. And yes, there's several other states that don't have this, but the difference is it's so much more important for battleground states to have their say, because they are really the ones that decide who controls the Senate and who controls the presidency. The House, not so much, but it depends on how you look at it. Because, yes, Delaware, like this is one that Fox News was comparing it to, has a lot more or less time to do early voting, but also at the same time, it's not competitive, and we know how it's going to vote. Yes, it's important for their voices to be heard, but battleground states like the state of Georgia, Florida, North Carolina, sort of Virginia, Texas, sort of Colorado, sort of New Mexico, Arizona, Nevada, Michigan, Pennsylvania, Wisconsin. These are all states that are very, very important to make sure everybody has the opportunity to vote. And when you get rid of mail-in ballot applications to register to get a mail-in ballot, then it's really going to hurt your turnout in your vote. The Republicans' excuse is this is going to eliminate how people can cheat. But there has been no evidence, especially in the state of Texas, of people cheating in this election. If they think that the votes in Georgia and Pennsylvania, primarily those two, Arizona, Michigan, Wisconsin as well, that Biden did not actually win that legitimately and Trump actually won that, then how do we not know that other states didn't have the same problem, and why did Republicans win there? If Democrats cheated in the state of Pennsylvania and Georgia, why didn't we win North Carolina? Why didn't Democrats win Florida? If we actually did cheat, why didn't we win Texas? So to say that there was actual legitimate cheating is really overstating, that there was actually cheating going on, because there's not actual evidence of that happening. And last thing that we're going to talk about in this bill is the new ID requirements for voting by mail. And this is another thing that is going to be suppressing votes of people that have low financial wealth. Because if you do not have a driver's license or something else that can work as your ID, then you can't vote. You make sure that you know, like the main thing, the reason that when you vote, they know who you are, is that when you register to vote, you make sure they know who you are. Not when you go up to vote. You don't have to show an ID to vote. You do that when you register to vote. And once you've registered, you shouldn't have to do it again. There are several states so that you have to show an ID to vote, and it's just not necessary, and it's really cutting off the people that don't have an access to an ID. Like states in Texas, they don't have some people cannot get an ID to vote, and then they won't be able to vote because they either don't have an address, because that's another thing that people are required to have, is an address to define who you are, or your ID, like a driver's license. So they think this is going to help them make sure there's no cheaters, but this is just helping richer Americans that primarily vote Republican, not necessarily, but a lot of times that is yes. And this is really just going to go back to helping Republicans, and how can Republicans stay in office? They're not trying to protect the Texan vote, trying to get everyone in Texas to vote, to see who they actually want to represent them in Congress, who they want to represent them in the state assembly, or their Senate, or the governorship. It's just about how can Republicans stay in power. And I really think that H.R. 1, that needs to be passed in Washington, D.C., and this really ties it in of why Texas Democrats have fled the state, to make sure that they are not there so they cannot vote on this ridiculous bill in the House of the Texas House. And we really need, we can't pass it without getting rid of the filibuster. So we need several Democrats that are not already on board to get rid of this filibuster. It might punch us in the back later on when we are not in the majority, But at the end of the day, it's going to help us move forward as a country. And it's just going to help us overall. And another thing that people are talking about, especially President Biden, is not just to get rid of the filibuster altogether, but on voting rights and things that are related to voting would not count, and you could change the rules so you cannot filibuster that. And I think that's probably a wonderful idea. However, I believe that we should just get rid of the filibuster altogether, but as of right now, anything that we can do on the filibuster is an improvement. And to get rid of the rule that you can't filibuster a voting right bill, I think it really needs to be removed. And that rule should not exist. You should be able, let me correct myself, you should not be able to filibuster a voting rights bill. So, Joe Manchin, Sinema, they all need to dig their hands in the sand. I don't know if that's a saying, but they really need to just vote to change the rules of the filibuster. All right. Next topic is on the infrastructure bill. That was a very long segment, but about $3.5 trillion in infrastructure that Democrats, I think it was yesterday, so for me that would have been Tuesday. On Tuesday, they did decide, all Democrats in the Senate did decide on a $3.5 trillion infrastructure bill. Progressives in the party, like Ocasio-Cortez and others, want it to be much higher, closer to $6 trillion, while 3.5 is quite low. There's not really any moderate Democrats that went lower because Joe Manchin has agreed to 3.5, and he's the most moderate in the Senate. However, so far we don't know any Republicans that are going to be supporting this infrastructure bill. This might change by the time this thing comes out tomorrow, which is going to be a Friday. However, we don't know yet. And I really think it's going to be very good to get this passed. This infrastructure bill will help lots of communities with roads and bridges. And I think it's going to be good to prioritize this as America is a growing country. We need this infrastructure with roads, bridges, etc. for our American people. Give back to the people. They voted for these politicians. What have these politicians done for them? What have Republicans done for their people? Vote to get rid of their health care? That's something that they did. Vote to undermine the election results? That's something that they did. Trying to suppress the vote of people in urban areas and others? That's something they did. So I think Republicans need to think about it. What are we going to do for the people? Are we going to say no to an infrastructure bill that's going to help millions and millions of Americans? Are we going to say no to it? Right? All right, so back to Texas. It's another story in Texas. So this isn't necessarily a news story. This has been out for about a month. But Greg Abbott has decided to build and continue Donald Trump's wall on the Texas border to, quote, fix the immigration crisis at the border that the Biden administration has been reluctant to address. And the thing about the border crisis is that a wall is not going to work. Yes, in places that the wall is put in, traffic of immigration has been down. But if you have a wall just straight across the border, it's not going to help anything. If you have a wall in one segment, the immigration will just move over towards the wall where there's no wall and just go through that. So obviously they're not going to go over the wall, they're just going to go around the wall. And if you put the wall all the way across the border, they're just going to go over the wall. It's not helping. It's just a waste of billions and billions of dollars. And if we go all the way across the border, it's going to be into trillions. I don't really think this is going to help. I think the Biden administration does need to do more in combating this immigration crisis. But I'm afraid the wall is just not that thing that they need to do. Greg Abbott, the governor of Texas, I think is making a mistake. He's going to be wasting lots of Texas funds I know Trump went down to the border. I think it was the same week that Kamala Harris went down to El Paso to visit the border. That was not this week. I think that was last week. But it's just going to be a waste of money for Texas. And that it's not going to help them whatsoever. And I really think that I don't really know myself what we can really do about this immigration crisis. But, like I said, the wall is not how you're going to do it. You're not going to get it by doing a wall. Wall could slow down traffic temporarily because they're going to be going around the wall, so they have to walk further. But once you have the wall all the way across, which they probably won't ever be able to do, they're just going to go over that wall. So, like I said, this is not going to be worthwhile for Texas or America as a whole. And another story is that it's going to be... It was yesterday, I missed it. Wait, was it yesterday? I don't know. Don Lemon and Biden are going to have a town hall. No, it's next week. It wasn't yesterday. It's going to be next Wednesday. Don Lemon is going to be hosting a town hall. He's part of CNN in Cincinnati, Ohio. I don't know much about what's going to happen there, but make sure to watch on CNN. I'm assuming other news networks are going to be broadcasting it. But it's going to be interesting to see what Biden is going to be answering a lot of questions on issues that America is facing. And as far as I'm aware, there are other stories like Haiti and Cuba. I think Cuba we should probably talk about before the episode's over. And I think if you're a regular human being, you should probably have heard about the unrest that's happening in Cuba with the protests against the communist government. So the people have started protesting the streets because the government has just raised their taxes significantly, similar to how it happened in Colombia not too long ago. But the difference is it's because it's a communist government. The people cannot do anything about it. And they've protested in the streets. Several have been killed by police. Several have been arrested. More than several have been arrested. Hundreds and hundreds have been arrested. There have been protests in America. I think there was some in Orlando earlier today. And in the unrest in Cuba has been affecting America because a lot of Cubans are thinking about moving to America for refuge. The unrest in Cuba is negatively affecting America. Biden has already said that he stands with the people. I think both sides of the aisle in the Senate and the House have both said the same thing. They stand with the people. They will not stand for the communist government in Cuba. And whatever the people want, they should probably get. They should lower the taxes. Yes, it helps the government a lot of the times to raise taxes. They'll have more money to spend. But most of the time in a communist government, the money that they get from the people, they don't spend it towards the people. They spend it on military funds or something else. The taxes in a government communist-run society does not help the people. So this is a big reason why both sides of the aisle are going to be with the people of Cuba. And I don't think there's much else to say. So we'll be seeing Sam on Tuesday for the next week's episode about whatever topic we're going to talk about. We haven't decided yet. Hopefully he's there. If he's not, then it might just be me again. But I'm pretty confident he will be here again. So thank you for watching. Make sure to tune in on Tuesday. Thank you. Bye.